Awesome. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Growth Led Podcast. Today, I'm here with Jeanne Hopkins. Jeanne, your resume reads like a who's who, and you've pretty much done, I think you've done everything. So let's get this straight, right? VP of Marketing at HubSpot.
Yes.
Have talked at all the big conferences. You were Women in Business in 2011, 2013, 14, 15. You were the CMO at Lola, which was actually a competitor to Upside Business Travel, where I was the head of growth.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that was crazy.
I know what 3 years ago. Hard to believe that
what a
the
crazy
world would take
experience.
such a pivot at that point.
Oh my God. Yeah. Best-selling author. I mean, so you've done it all. I mean, I guess let's start out. Where does this podcast find you?
Right now, I after a series of post-COVID fails in my jobs, I decided to go back out on my own, and I created a company called Salty Marketing Group. And Salty is this 40-foot tall seahorse in the center of the town that I live in Mattapoisett, and it was on the way to Cape Cod on Route 6, and I feel that, I'm a little salty at times because I can deliver some marketing speak with just a little bit of spice. So I thought it would be appropriate. So I'm affiliating myself with other agencies and stuff and people that I've known for a long time. So when they need kind of a grown-up in the room or and I don't mean it in a negative way, but
Totally.
Sometimes someone with more seniority that has seen it, done it, bought the t-shirt, the whole thing. Sometimes it's good when they're talking to clients that are trying to figure things out. And right now, a lot of organizations are just trying to figure things out. So I spend a lot of time right now talking and advising and just trying to get to the nub or the crux of the issues that they're facing. I had a call this morning at 8 a.m., for example, and they were talking about, I need to hire a marketing person, but I don't know if I should go this way or that way. And I said, first of all, you need a marketing person that understands sales. Because it's remarkable how few marketing people understand sales, Craig. I mean, it's just really the whole process.
I know. Well, that's so I guess like a couple questions in there already. What percentage of your time right now during this weird market would you say are dealing with things having to do with the weird market versus just standard things that you would see like a year ago?
Oh, well, I am spending a lot of time working on understanding AI and the implications of AI and copywriting and trying to understand it. A former colleague at HubSpot is now the CMO at Jasper AI.
And we use Jasper.
You use it? Yeah. And so I've been playing around with it. And then the Marketing AI Institute, Paul Reitzer, they're out in Cleveland. I took their piloting AI course. I have the book and stuff. But when I was my last gig, I sponsored a number of webinars because our platform was supposed to be utilizing AI in an effort to be able to find outdoor advertising that hit the persona that the marketer was going after. I thought it was a nice tie-in with that group. And so speaking at a conference, webinars, that sort of thing. And just, I'm not a programmer. I'm not a super smart person like that. I'm just trying to understand how it can be used and not in a way that's plagiarism in any way, shape, or form. Former colleague at HubSpot, Dan Zarella, chided me on LinkedIn because I had said something about content created by AI tools, right? Whatever they are. And he said, well, this is exactly what I've been railing against since the beginning of time about how things have to be data-based. And I said, I'm not arguing with you, Dan. It's like, he's a super smart guy and he always is about original content. And so I can see that this is really bothering him. But I've tried using it in a couple of different ways. And unfortunately, the things I'm coming up with, I'm using the OpenAI GPT one. And I've tried, there's a Writer's another one, and I'm trying to use it. But the stuff that I'm getting back, I think that you really need to be understanding about the prompts that you're providing the AI.
Oh,
Otherwise, you
that's
just
such a
get
key.
back generic
It's
content.
generic crap, right?
Right,
And then
right.
like what I think is you're already seeing it
Yep.
is, people just pumping out really kind of not great content,
Yeah.
and it's already a crowded space. So then the
Right.
question is, well, I think what's going to happen with this is Google's going to probably reward the quote unquote creative side, and they've probably got some tricks up their
Well, the
sleeves.
editing side. I mean, so much of this is you've got to be a good editor. I mean, I'm the daughter of a newspaper man, and he was the managing editor of a newspaper in Massachusetts for 40 years. And, it is all about the, keep it simple, your who,
Yeah,
what, where, when, why. But also, I'm a huge believer in statistics and
yep,
quotes. And what you don't get from the AI, what I haven't seen yet, that I've just got to keep figuring out the prompts or figuring out the edits and that sort of thing, is quotes from people that can actually support or negate your particular premise of what you're trying
yeah.
to write. So I think it's right now, it reminds me of the, what was that, podcast, or that open, what was it called, something chat room, something like that they had, but it was a year ago and it was the hottest thing and
Oh, the
everybody was
Clubhouse product.
Clubhouse, right,
Yes. Oh
and
man.
where is that now? And I just feel like this is
Yeah, that was crazy.
people are playing with it,
Yeah.
but they're not going to be able to leverage it. And this is Paul's whole premise, who's been studying this
Yeah.
for 10, 11, 12 years. And he's been saying, this is something that you need to be aware of. Now, I think it can be used as a prompt, and it could help you as long
Yeah.
as you know how to edit. And if you know
100%.
how to edit and create excellent content. But is it going to create 2,500 word essays or pillar posts? I don't know. I
That
just,
somebody's interested in
yeah.
reading. Yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
prompts is a big piece of it. And I think
Right.
look, I think the way we're thinking about it with our own content production is it's a tool in our toolkit,
Yep.
just like Figma's a tool or Photoshop was a tool, and then Canva
Yep.
came along and made it easier. And I think it hopefully turns into something that can be used for good and in terms of productivity. But all the craziness around. So I had a debate with a founder in the Web3 space this fall, and he tried to convince me that this was like right at the height of like the market was just the best
Yeah.
it's ever
He did.
been, and like
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
are
Yeah. Yeah.
literally throwing money at it. And he tried to argue with me that new types of companies don't need to really even understand business. Like you can just spin something up and it'll just take off. And this person was trying
Really?
to argue with me, saying like, you don't even need to understand the fundamentals. Like it's just everything
Really?
has changed. Like it's just different. And I was like, I actually
You still
strongly
have to figure out where the money's going.
bingo. Yeah.
It's remarkable to me how few people understand a basic P&L. If
Yeah.
you have budget responsibility, let's face it, if you're in marketing and you're leading a marketing organization, 40% of your overhead are people. The
Mhm.
60% are programs. If the people that you have on your team don't know how to manage the programs, guess what's going to happen? You're going to overspend. And then your CFO is not going to be happy with you. And
Well, let's lean in there. I mean, so and I think I heard this when you were on we were chatting earlier before we started recording the Louis Grenier's podcast on
Mhm.
Everybody Hates Marketers. And I think one of the things, and I'm paraphrasing what you said, but it was something like you have to trust your team to make the right decisions. And
Right.
part of the theme of this podcast is talking about failure. So do you have any stories around where maybe you gave the team a lot of leeway and the result was less than stellar?
Yes, yes. I am a huge believer in bringing younger people aboard and giving them a chance to be successful. And my only ask is that if you get stuck, come to me and I'll walk you through it. Okay. And I've had to say to some people painfully that if I have to tell you everything that you need to do, then I don't need you. and I
Interesting.
don't
Yeah.
mean to be mean, but it does
Yeah.
come across mean because,
Mm.
they're in their 20s somewhere, and they think they're doing the greatest thing since sliced bread. Now, I'm not going to tell them what to do because they may come up with something that's 110% better than I ever came up with. I don't know. But when I was at Continuum, we were doing a conference for all of the partners that they dealt with thousands of managed service providers. So having this 3-day conference, we started in Boston, and my idea was to have kind of a genius bar like an Apple, because so many of these individuals, they were all IT people. They all left an IT organization and they went out and they started their own business. And managed service providers would typically have their own what do you call it? Like the servers that they'd make sure that everybody was up and running, and
Yeah.
passwords, all that kind of
All the
stuff, a help
infrastructure
desk,
stuff.
all that. And so the idea was marketing 101, because so we started putting together things like, these are emails, these are holiday emails that you can start sending to your customers
Yeah.
using this type of language, providing them with the tools to be able to email and market to them. So I had this young guy, super smart, great writer, just such a nice personality. And I had given him the responsibility of figuring out how we're going to work this genius bar. And his name was Brandon, and just a charming young man. And he was stuck. And I would have a call, and I remember being here in my home and saying, Brandon, man, this isn't good enough. You haven't given you what you need to do is put together a schedule. You need to do this, you need to do that. And who's going to be fulfilling these things? You have a schedule. Some people are going to want social media. Some people are going to want you to look at their email. Some are going to want you to look at their website, because basically you're trying to teach them marketing so that they can sell more, so that you can make more money as an organization. And I think I had a lot of confidence in his capabilities. I knew that he was capable. He just didn't know where to look. And I did come down on him like a ton of bricks, because we were like 2 weeks out and we still had a bunch of stuff to be able to figure out. And I think he was unpleasantly shocked by my response, because it wasn't like I like dropped the ball and said, okay, 2 weeks before, where are we? I kept checking in and checking in and checking in. And I don't think he understood that. And I think the critical thing there was, we need to do a dry run. Right? Because we can't do this during the conference itself. How are we going to do a dry run? How are we going to set it up so that when people are dropping in, who's going to be the scheduler? Who's going to make sure that they're showing up? All that kind of stuff. And it takes time to kind of figure out where things can go sideways, particularly with conferences. Conferences are really good, strong events people are really tough. At that point, I had a CEO that, you needed to put, those little tiles that you put on your keys and stuff so that you can find them. This guy needed a tile because you never could find him, right? So I had sicked Courtney Margosian, a charming young woman, 22, 23. I said, you're his handler. You need to know where he is at all times so that we can call you and make sure that and I swear to goodness, I used to watch her run around after him. He even made her pack up his hotel room and bring his suitcase. I know.
Oh, that's great. So is it basically like finding the balance between the highly organized person who's like really task driven, and then maybe the more free spirited like thinker who's coming up with good ideas? Is it finding that balance? Like, how do you know to do that? Or did you just kind of trust your instinct with like, you had to match this person with this other person?
Well, Courtney, God willing, I don't know how many people would have raised their hand to be able to be the handler. But it worked out well for her because she learned a lot. And that
Yeah.
was a really good experience for her. And as we continued to grow that particular conference, she became the conference organizer. You know, this is
Oh,
how we had this giant whiteboard with
yeah.
Post-its on it for the content. You know, you have to have the run of show, what exactly is going on, people with walkie-talkies, whether they're
Yeah.
sponsors or whatever they're doing. I've done enough of these over the years that there's a muscle memory that comes to
Yeah.
it. But it's like budgets. There's a lot of people that don't know how to do it. I had
Yep.
one person on the team that she was just into food. And we had the weirdest food. I mean, was the food good? I guess so. Yeah, but there was no place to sit. So there's people in the hallway sitting, eating this very good food, but it was like, I kind of think we need tables and chairs.
That's amazing.
So,
That is awesome.
yeah, you live and learn some of these things. I mean, she was definitely a food, a foodie. And so
Yeah.
she had the good food, but the practicalities of, and so what ends up happening at the end of a conference, people complain about how hot or how cold the rooms were, and they complain about the food. Those are the two things that happen.
That's conference success 101.
Yeah, it was too hot. It was too cold, but we did NPS. We did NPS surveys after it, and so we had really, really high NPS scores. People felt like they were being taken care of, that we met their needs, and it was successful in that regard. So that's always good. Yeah. That's fun.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So we read off some of your accolades at the intro, but was there a point in your career where you either stumbled or you were overcoming failure within an organization or significant challenges? And if so, what was it? And what were some of the ways that, going back to that time, how did you overcome those challenges or failures?
Well, that's a good question, Craig. I can think of a number of times that I failed miserably. I think that overcoming the failures is a little bit more along the lines of, I can think, I gave my notice when I was at Symmetricom and living in Massachusetts, and the board and the CEO wanted me to move to California with my family. And we did. And, they gave me a nice package and all that. But coming from Massachusetts and moving to the San Jose area was a real culture shock for us. And it was a culture shock in that the housing costs were so astronomical. Everything costs more. Everything. The only cheap thing
I did
is
the
an
move
avocado.
from DC to the Bay Area with two little kids. It was painful.
They did a good job they hired a person to help us find an area to live. So we moved to Morgan Hill, which was a 100-year-old community that actually had a main street. But we just felt so isolated and so away from things that I don't think it was necessary for us to move. And the financial implications of doing something like that have, impacted us for a decade.
So you actually did the move.
Mm-hmm. And we should have rented. Yeah. We should have rented and not bought. And then, so then I got recruited to work in, and I shouldn't have done this either, Florida, to work for a company. And then they hired this guy, and he just, sometimes people, I don't like people when they like they're holding a coffee pot. How do you make coffee? Gee, I don't know. How do you make coffee? Things like this, strange things like that. And he was, he wasn't very nice, I guess is the best way to put it. And anyway, so at that point, we came back from Florida to Massachusetts, but it was in 2009. And the market had had tanked, and we had bought a house there. And so we ended up having to rent the house and all that kind of stuff. So the mistakes I've made have been financial ones primarily, right? And then it's really it wasn't necessary for me to live in Florida, put it that way. And our daughters, we have twin daughters, and the schools in Florida are not known for, let's look at it. Massachusetts, Florida.
Right.
So, anyway, and even when we went to California, the California was challenging. And I ended up at the very last minute sending them to private school because they were just used to being in separate classrooms, but classrooms with 20, 25 kids that were, culturally diverse, that sort of thing. But putting 45 kids in a classroom where in California, they eliminated English as a second language. So you could have, where I think it's great where you have 15, 19 different languages spoken at home. How do these poor teachers do things like that? I mean, my kids are good kids, but I mean, they're not rocket scientists, and putting them in that kind of an environment to be able to, at a particular point when you're in second, third, fourth. And I remember this is a fail as a mommy.
So I mean, look, when we a similar story, like I took a job at a startup in the Bay Area, and we knew that we likely had to move, but we were going to move in the summer, and it was like January, it was December this time. And and then a month into the job, the board decided that I had to be out there. And so we had to basically just fire sale everything. And it just disrupt everything.
And it's hard for kids to start in the middle of the year.
I mean, and then we're just bolting across the country, with no plan. Ecosystem, no plan, and look, I think that ultimately that led to really interesting things, but the transition period was just brutal. I mean, like you just pack up and you leave everything. And then you start to wonder, like, it's interesting because it's a job decision that impacts your entire life.
Oh yeah. And then some, your family, going back for the holidays. I mean, Thanksgiving is not real big out in California, in Northern California. It's not like in the Northeast where, hey, where are you going for Thanksgiving?
Right.
And I'm going to my grandparents, and I'm going here, and I'm going to my in-laws, and I'm going here, and I'm doing this for the whole weekend, and having a class reunion and all that kind of stuff. And out there, different. Thanksgiving is like,
I know. It is interesting, the little cultural things, even coast to coast, and then obviously international.
Right.
But it's interesting. And I think that the more you talk to successful people, I think a lot of them have had that stint in their life or in their career where there were some stumbles. It's very rare that I have a couple of friends who on paper, everything looks perfect. And when you talk to them, it's like they quite literally did have it all planned out. But for the rest of us, it's like, we just get into a scenario. And for me, it's often been, I get into a startup scenario with kind of blinders on, right? You get in, you're excited. It's something new. And you're like, hey, I'm going to disrupt this place for the good. And we're going to, we're going to make it work. And then you get in and there's just challenge after challenge after challenge after challenge. There's a culture, there's a leadership team, there's maybe
there's no money. There's no money.
Or there's too
you don't know where the money's coming from.
It's crazy, right? And I think which gets me to, I guess, the next question around looking at within one of your companies. Is there any, I mean, you've probably done hundreds, thousands of campaigns and strategies and implementations. Is there anything that was just the moment it launched, you're like, we're in for a world of hurt here? Either brought up a lawsuit, or you burned a ton of money, or people hated it, or you got fired?
Well, where do I start, Craig? We had, when I was at Smart Bear, which is a DevOps tool company, known for Test Complete, they wanted to do a product. Sergey, who was the engineering manager and the nominal head of the business unit, that accounted for some 40% of the revenue, right? And he wanted to name it Load Complete. And I have a lot of trademark, I've done a lot of that trademark stuff, going way back. And so talking to the trademark attorney, all you had to do was a very simple look for load complete
Right.
on the website. Guess what? There was another company that had that. And I said, Sergey, I just don't think that we should do this. And he's like, nope, I want to do it. I want to. And I'm like, I'm telling you, it's going to come and bite us back in the back end. And so it wasn't a big company. It was a small company. It was based in Europe somewhere. I can't remember exactly, but nevertheless, so we do this big thing. So Test Complete had a really good reputation in the DevOps industry. It was solid. It was stable, all that. And big companies used it because they couldn't use open source testing tools. So it was good. So then launching Load Complete, which was all about figuring out the load of your particular application and how much bandwidth did it take from either a virtual server or whatever that you're looking at, like how likely was it to break. So we launched it, and in 2 days, I had a phone call from the CEO founder of, guess what, Load Complete. So we had to, and it's just. And
were you the CMO? So you picked up the phone as CMO. Okay.
Yeah. And I remember I could see myself sitting there going, yes, sir, I understand, sir, I understand. And he said, we're going to sue you if you don't do this and you don't do that. You've taken our name, you've taken our trademark, and yes, sir, no, sir, blah, blah, blah. Because just defending something like that, and especially at the very beginning, it was just annoying as all get out because it didn't need to happen. No, I know you like the name, but you know what? Someone else has it. So
were you worried like that this thing was going to like take at that point, were you like, well, I knew that this was a bad idea and I recommended it, but like, it went what the CEO decided, like we went with, but did you think at that time, do you remember if you thought this is going to take us out? Like how worried were you at that point where you're talking?
Not worried because, when you first launch a product, it's not that hard to rewind it.
You've got some time.
You had to rebrand everything. You had to blah, blah, blah. You had to go back and kind of reconfigure things, but it wasn't the CEO. It wasn't Joe Kravickas. It was Sergey, who was the general manager. Joe really, he was like, you do what you think you need to do, Jeanne. And at the time I was like, oh man, it was the thing I didn't like about it was, you make false starts, things happen, whatever. It's just, I don't like undoing something. The amount of effort that went into launching it and then having to like, oh, never mind, let's rewind it. And then, oh, let's do it again.
we just had one of these come up internally with one of our projects that I can't quite yet talk about, but it was painful. There's a holding pattern that's put in place. What is this like? So that, and it sounds like you've had a number of these. What are these? What are those phone calls or what are those experiences? I guess it's like a failure, right? Like, let's just quantify it. It's like, well, you took a risk, like it went out there. It didn't work. It in fact got you a phone call within 2 days, or like we get a cease and desist, right? Like we know how this goes. It's not fun, but it's manageable. What do you think lessons like that can teach other people that are maybe in leadership positions where they feel like it's like, this is not the right thing? Like, should people should the CMO say, you know what, like, this is the brand, this is kind of in my area of ownership. Like we're just not going to do it. How do you know how much friction to give there? Right. This is tricky, right? Cause like you've put a bunch of stuff into this, and how do you make that decision, or what can you learn from a scenario like that for the next time?
So in trademark heaven, what you learn is that you really want to be able to protect the brand to a certain degree. And this is the whole thing having to do with domains. It has to do with, whether your tags, whatever you're using as your social handles, all that kind of thing becomes incredibly important. And also not affiliating yourselves with organizations that might be suspect. It's a hard thing to be, because you do end up sometimes with CEOs that are called idea puppies. I got an idea. I'm going to go do this. Let's go glittery object. Let's go do something like that. And the key to that is, if you can, is to be able to say, I like the idea. I'm going to put it on the backlog. Right now, we're in the middle of Q3. Let's execute against Q3, and then let's revisit if we can in Q4 or next year or something. I had that most recently where he wanted to do something at some conference, and I'm like, I don't have the budget for it. I can't execute against this.
Yeah.
I like your idea, but it's just not in the cards right now. And and trying to be that voice of reality, and many marketers are not necessarily pragmatic. You take a look at things, and I like to do a monthly exercise of what do we stop doing? What do we continue doing? And what do we start doing? And are we in agreement on these things?
Yeah.
That just more Instagram posts and they're not delivering customers. Why don't we stop it?
So do you do this with all your clients? Because we do something similar. We call it kill, scale, or hold steady. It's like kill it.
Nice. I like that. I like
steady,
that.
But it's kind of informal. So like, do you do this? Is this like a formal practice that you put in place with the stuff you work on?
Well, in my teams, yes. I mean, there's a few things I like to implement. When I go into a new company, I want to look at their database. I want to look at their team. I want to look at their budget. Those are very important things to really have kind of an understanding of, and where the revenue comes from. Right. You want to look at what's converting, so their pipeline, you want to be able to figure out their funnel. Where's the leakage? Because every funnel has leakage, being able to figure that out. And it's remarkable to me how many people misuse their CRM and they don't really understand that it deprecates at approximately 5% per month, and how urgent and important it is to keep filling the top of the funnel. Right. But there's people that you want to talk to, and there's people that don't want you to talk to them.
Right.
And you should clear them out of your database, because it really screws up your metrics. And so people will have a bunch of dead names in there. That's why I like a tool called Zero Bounce. Wicked cheap.
Love Zero Bounce.
I said, aren't they great? They're so great. Awesome. Yeah.
And you plug your list in, it scrubs all the bad emails, you re-upload it.
And then you've just eliminated the crap.
You've eliminated the crap, and you've increased your open rates.
Well, that's it. Exactly.
I mean,
right.
You get rid
data.
of all. Let me ask you this, controversial question, I guess, but customer acquisition or retention? Choose one.
Retention. I think,
even though there is that fall off of that 5% a month on
it's what I think, Craig, this might be, heresy, I don't know, is that your marketing leader, CRO, for lack of a better title, because I don't think there's a better one, marketing is part of a motion, and your motion for marketing includes support on sales of direct and indirect and e-com and what other sales motions you have, and then customer success. All three of those customer-facing responsibilities should report to one person so that you are able to work across the board. What I've observed is that many customer success organizations are bolt-ons, and it ends up like the CFO has that, or the CEO, and they don't know what to do with it. And what does customer marketing have to deal with? Oh, they should have access to the email list for the customers. They should have these degree of programs. And in order to build these things out, you need to have strong lieutenants that are in that understand that the customer retention motion is critical to the success of your organization. Acquisition, that's a misnomer in my mind, because, I look at it like there's 4 levels. First one is employee marketing. Are you supporting your employees? Do they know what the heck is going on all the time?
Do they even know what you do?
Exactly.
What you offer.
Yes. And then number 2 is customer marketing. And it's remarkable to me how few organizations spend any time at all on customer marketing, even though the net retention could be 70% of your overall goal for the year. So let's just say you spend 5 to 10% on employees, you spend 15 to 20 on customer marketing, and then most marketers spend 100% of their time on prospect marketing, but like we just talked about the CRM, or you're talking about your messaging, or they don't understand the funnel. You could be creating leads until the cows come home, but if they're not converting to anything, that's not really prospect. And then the 4th one is community. what is your community that you're engaged in? Do you have a community? When I was at Ipswich, again, working for Joe Kravickas, when I was at Ipswich, they had made the mistake 3 years earlier of getting rid of their community manager, an amazing guy, a great community manager, a great technical guy. And these are like technical products, right? And the IT department was responsible for rebuilding the community. So let me tell you about that.
How'd that go?
So they took down the old community page, right?
Okay.
And they put a page up that said coming soon. And in that coming soon, which was up for 3 years, by the way, I don't know what constitutes soon in your life, but 3 years. So there was no sense of what it was. So those people were calling the tech support team, and they probably shouldn't have been. So anyway, so the IT department launched it. He was a smart guy. He was a very nice guy that did it, but he did it in a vacuum. He didn't talk to the partners. He didn't talk to the sales organization. And he sure as heck didn't talk to the marketing organization. He launched it, and guess what it was missing? A telephone number. A telephone number. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Because if you're in a serious situation, yeah, you can go into a community and you can try to find a solution from someone else. But you know what? What's wrong with having a telephone number on the site? It's just like not having a telephone number when you want to buy something. And I know we use chat a lot right now. And when I was at Ipswich, we used the Drift tool. Yep. And I had a third party monitoring the chat because I could not get the sales organization to monitor the chat. And we were able to build a $6.5 million pipeline because it's a global company, right? And so they were answering questions, 7 days a week that turned in.
I just want to put a pin in that piece because this has been, we're kind of in that pre-growth stage. We're growing really nicely, but we're not at full scale. And I think companies, as they're emerging, really struggle with community.
Yes.
We've struggled with community. And even the infrastructure of is there a phone number? Is there a live chat? But I think it's really clear, right? If you're selling humans, regardless of what your business model is. Make it easy for people to get in touch and to spend time with somebody that's probably a human on your team to educate or answer questions that buyer who's actually the most they are ready to go either to sign up or to leave, right? Mm-hmm. If they can't get their questions answered. And conversely, if they can get their questions answered, they're much more likely to sign up. And I feel like we've just overthought that whole process. I mean, even with product-led growth, it's we expect the product's going to do everything. Well, it kind of does.
Up to a certain point. Up to a certain point.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think your observations on sales and marketing are really, really interesting. And I think there's a similar equation on the marketing and product side as well, where I think
totally.
Closer you can bring these teams, the more effective they're going to be. I've seen so many scenarios where the product team they don't like marketing and they treat.
Well, they really don't like sales.
They really don't.
Sales has no problem sending 9 million Slacks, emails, hallway conversations about I need a green button, otherwise I can't make this 25,000. So what I started doing, Craig, is and I was doing this at Lola as an example. So once a month, I'd have a meeting for the 3 reasons we win and the 3 reasons we lose. And I'd have the inside sales, the direct sales, the indirect sales. I'd have technical support. I'd have the service organization, marketing, and customer success, all on one side of the table, and the product team on the other side of the table. So they had to give me their slides. I ran the meeting. It was a 90-minute meeting. I recorded the meeting. And the idea was the product team was going to hear it all at the same time. And the CEO, Mike Volpe and Paul English, Paul was the CTO, he would hear, and he said, when I first started the meeting, he said, I didn't want to go to another meeting, but he felt that it was the most important meeting because he actually heard in uniform methodology and a referenceability to be able to say, these are the things we need. And as an example, cars, being able to rent cars for business travel management, that was important.
Fascinating.
But but the product team, they had to hear it in a way that they understood it. And so I'd taken that and brought it to other companies. But some product people are like, I don't need this. I don't need you to tell me what to do. I've got my product roadmap. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Right. And it's like, well, that's helpful.
And this is what you call this the voice of the this is one of the things, and I was reading this in your bio, the voice of the customer meetings. I mean, within Lola, that sounds like that's what that was. And you're kind of aligning all these stakeholders to get literally what the customers are asking for.
Right.
And then bumping it right up against what the product team thinks they're going to build. And these are things that that you probably need to build.
Right.
I mean, that's super interesting. Was sales involved in that too?
Oh, yeah. Direct and indirect sales. Yep, always. And because as we just pointed out, that the sales team would constantly be hounding the poor product team.
Yeah.
And so I had a product marketer on my team, Des, great guy. And he was trying to take all those inputs from the sales organization and present it weekly to the product team so that there was one unifying force there to be able to say, this is kind of what they need as far as a feature set or, whatever it is, what's the roadmap? And, you're iterating, everything is on the fly and you're just releasing to be able to update the product to be able to meet the needs of the marketplace. So it worked out pretty well. And the product team was particularly amenable to willing to listen. And so at the next meeting, for the December meeting, they talk about what they did as a result of the November meeting.
Yeah.
The January, what did they do as a result of that? Not in a long-winded, we added this line of code or anything like that, but basically to say to both sides, we heard what you said, and this is how we changed the roadmap.
That is absolutely incredible. I mean, I think that's really going to resonate with the product listeners we have here. And frankly, just for anybody that's kind of running product orgs. I have one other question for you, and I guess then we'll wrap it up. But I feel like, and I'm not sure if you agree with this or not, so I'll put it out there as a question. Like, I think that we as a society have really put a lot of emphasis on perfection. And there's just a lot of pressure on, especially younger folks, to kind of be their best selves all the time. And maybe that's changing with the youngest generation, but how do you, do you see that as a problem within the workforce? And B, how do you encourage staff and team members to not be afraid of taking on some risk in terms of what they're putting out there? Like, how do you think about that?
Well, if you really think about the college system, the educational system, when they go to college, there's always just one way to do something, to get your A or whatever. It's like X plus Y equals Z, and there's no variations. It's the algorithm, not a heuristic. And one of the things because we're living in a digital world, right? Everything's digital. I mean, back when I started in marketing, we had printed data sheets, and it's like you had to make sure you had enough of the damn things all the time. So you were constantly printing. Now everything's digital. And if something goes out that's not right, you're not doing surgery. Nobody's going to bleed. Nobody's going to die. And it's more important to meet deadlines to me, that it's like a newspaper, right? If somebody decided we're not going to come out with the Sunday New York Times, do you think people might complain? I think just a little bit. So you have deadlines. And the hardest thing is for many people, that I'm okay with 70% accuracy. If it's 70%, it's like an MVP, right? Is it viable? Is it minimal? It's fine. Just send it out and let's just see what happens. And then you can kind of fix it. Now, have I made some mistakes? Yes, I have made mistakes with some of my team members. One of them had something on a thank you page, and I'm like, why did you do that? And I did that in a meeting, and it was a visceral response to what she had done. And I know she did it with the best possible intentions, and I should have kept my big fat mouth shut and should have said to her afterwards, okay, can we fix that? Because we could fix it. But it was just like, I was looking at her going, I can't believe you did that. But I didn't, it was just a knee-jerk reaction, which was terrible. And she's worked for me in 3 companies now, and very talented individual. I can't speak highly enough of her. And but I think about some of the stupid stuff I've said over the years, because it's a two-way communication, right? I don't need to know that you're going to a doctor's appointment because you need to have, your toenails clipped. I don't care. If you're going to go somewhere, I just expect you to get your job done. You can just say, I'm going to be out for the next hour and a half. Good enough for me.
Right.
You don't have to tell me the why and the wherefore and the when and all that. Just, I know you're going to do your job. But however, I think that many of these team members struggle with, what exactly am I doing? What am I doing that's going to add value? And that is a difficult thing to teach. I like, during the course of a year or even a half year, I'd like my people to have one big project, a couple of medium projects, and then something they own, like a program. And whether it's building a podcast, if it's creating the newsletter. So Kaylee, that I just mentioned, when we were at Lola, we were trying to do a newsletter, and it just was a dog, and after 5 months, it was, do you think we should kill it? It was hers. And I'm like, Kaylee, do you think we should kill it? And she said, well, it's really not generating any results. And I said, it's okay if you kill it. And I said, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to create a deck about when is it time to pull the plug on something. Because marketers have they'll keep adding and adding.
Just keep it going. Yeah, absolutely. Like a product, you just keep adding features.
Yes, exactly. But it doesn't work. So she built a deck and she presented it internally. And I think it's a good thing for people to know that sometimes you just have to kill it.
Absolutely love it. Well, I think we'll wrap there. Thank you so much, Jeanne. Where can people find you? Is it best on LinkedIn? Where should they go?
Sure. LinkedIn. Well, yep. You can find me on LinkedIn, and love to be able to connect with more people. Love to be able to talk to them. And, I may not be the most brilliant person, but I'm darn practical.
Well, I had a blast. I really appreciate your time today. I learned a ton. And
Thanks,
and I'm looking at our website, and I think I'm going to put a phone number and maybe a chat on there. It's going to have to happen.
Test it.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you for all the perspective that you bring to the market. Appreciate it. Thanks.